Well, if you can hear me,
I can hear
you. Why don't we start by just going around and seeing who's on AMS? So, see, first of all, did I hear Everett?
Everett is here.
Yeah, this is Paul Peachtree. I'm actually on the phone.
Okay, nice to see you, Paul. Nice to hear you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, who else is on there? Do I see Spokane?
Spokane's here.
Who's out there?
This is Deb Cox. Hi, Chris.
Hi. Okay.
Go ahead.
Let's see.
Jackie Englert, College of Pharmacy.
Okay. Who else?
Sarah Kohler, College of Pharmacy.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Celestina Barbosa-Leiker from the College of Nursing.
I'm Roy Almeida from the College of Medical Sciences.
Margaret Holt, Assistant to the Chancellor.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
It's all of us.
Are you out there to approve
We
it?
also got Mark Beatty with the College of Business.
Okay.
Greg Elledge with desktop support.
Okay. Great. Let's see. Tri-Cities.
Dick Pratt, School of Environment.
Okay. Let's see. Who else is WSU West on?
Yes, it's Sylvia Cantor, Connors, Martha Aitken, WSU Extension.
Okay, great. And is there anyone I've missed?
Good morning, everybody. This is Steve Bolins from Vancouver.
Ah, I see. There. Thank you. Okay. Anyone else I missed? That's pretty good. Okay. Okay, great. So I'm going to try and speak loudly until the mic gets fixed. So welcome to our town hall on the Grand Challenges, our very hot town hall on the Grand Challenges. The 6 challenges to not faint during the meeting. We'll do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. So the purpose of today's meeting, as many of you know, is we've had the 120-day study. It defined the challenges. We had many of you involved. I want to thank you for that. I'll go through that in a minute. But we have many more faculty we'd like to get involved in members of the university committee. So this is the first of actually 2 of these we'll do before the WSU 125th, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. Okay, so we're basically here to talk to them about what the challenges are, describe them to you, describe their excitement to you. They're very exciting, new research opportunities, sort of interdisciplinary active things, and to be a big part of the university's agenda going forward. I'm excited about it. I want to make you excited about it, and I want to be able to talk in the microphone. Okay. But anyway, that's why we're here. It's just to town hall this and get information to you and get your participation and involvement. So I'm going to put up the agenda briefly, and then I'm going to turn it over. We're very fortunate that Acting President Bernardo is here, so I'll turn to him in a moment. But this is the format of our meeting. I'll give an overview. Then we're very fortunate today to have a representative of the leadership team from each of our 5 challenges present. They will take 5 minutes, 5 Earth minutes, not 5 Jovian minutes, or 5 minutes to present their challenge. And 5 minutes is a challenge, I know. Okay. And then we'll take questions and discussion. Okay. And I'm pleased to say that John Gardner, thank you, it's much better. John Gardner will be joining us also to talk about this from the foundation perspective. Let me say briefly, and you'll hear this again when I give my talk, the grand challenges are going to be an integral part of the WSU 125th in September, September 17 and 18, an integral part of obviously the university's agenda as we go forward, as Dan articulated so nicely in his note to the university a few days ago. So with that, Dan, if you wouldn't mind coming down and making a few remarks, that'd be just very nice.
So I won't even take 5 Earth minutes. So I just, first of all, I wanted to just briefly reach out to everybody here, since it's a large audience, and say thank you for all of your support during what has been an incredibly difficult couple of weeks for Washington State University. Special thanks to those who have reached out to me personally. It is difficult for many of us, or for all of us, but some of us had personal relationships with President Floyd, and so we're carrying that burden as well. It is important for us to keep moving forward. That's what President Floyd would expect of us. That's what we will do. The 120-day research plan, the plan derived from the activity, is an incredibly important part of that. The grand challenges are an important piece of that. But I will also note, as we move forward with this exercise, that it is much bigger than the grand challenges. In fact, to be truthful, just my own personal opinion is that the grand challenges have gotten a little bit, perhaps too much attention, and the recommendations out of that task force report are at least equally important. The grand challenges obviously get attention because everybody's looking for themselves in the grand challenge, and the grand challenges will dictate where we invest resources. But I will also say that from a resource allocation standpoint, the grand challenges aren't enough. We're going to have to drill down within those grand challenges and figure out where to invest to move that grand challenge. Just about everything we do as an institution, you can probably find within one of the grand challenges, and they're well done, et cetera. But the next level, where to invest within the grand challenges, is an important next stage in decision making. It's great to see not only faculty here, but also what I would call resource gatherers, people from our government relations team and development team. John Gardner will be here. This is a team effort. Obviously research is driven by the faculty, but we can't do much without resources, and just waiting for the resources to flow in from Olympia is not going to be a successful strategy. With that being said, I wanted to recognize somebody, because there's unsung heroes at WSU that faculty or staff or students really don't kind of appreciate. They're kind of like the IT folks, you never really know what they do until something goes wrong, and then they get a hell of a lot of blame. I want to recognize that guy right there, Chris Miller. We had an incredible outcome in Olympia, both on the capital side and the operating side. We couldn't be happier with the outcome. I might add that the other guys might not be as happy, and that doesn't have anything to do with us. It's just, it is a reflection on our team and how well they hung together through an incredibly long and complex session, and particularly over the last few days, as there were ebbs and flows and calls at midnight and calls at 5 in the morning and everything else, and all this going on while we were trying to deal with the grief of the loss of our leader. And our team in Olympia, just outstanding. So thank you, Chris, for your work. I just can't say enough about that. And that's what you got to have the money to fuel the car here. So thanks to Chris, and thank you for attending. I know summer's when we get a lot of, when you get your work done, so to speak, in terms of research, and thanks for taking a little bit of time off to do this. So thank you. And that probably was more than 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks very much, Dan. So let's just go down the agenda then, and I'll give a short overview then, and then we'll move into the discussion of each of the particular challenges. Okay, so actually I think we were talking a lot about this in the last few minutes. So on the right side of this chart are the words from The university strategic plan. As you know, many of you know, I've been here about a year. And even before I got here, President Floyd and Provost Bernardo then at the time and others gave me a job, which is to, identify areas of excellence and emerging areas for investment, right? And so we got started on the 120-day study right away to do that. As I'll talk about in a moment, that study had two pieces, the grand challenges and also all the implementation recommendations, which is a lot of effort, and we'll go through that in another meeting. It's very important, as Dan said. And as Dan also said, he emphasized that in his recent note to us on the left there, which we've got to carry through on this. And let me just say, by the way, that I did the opportunity to brief President Floyd on the implementation plan, the recommendations, and these challenges, and he was very enthusiastic about it. So I'm sure he would be, as Dan said, we very much want to see this continue. So wanted to start off by thanking many of you in this room that participated in the 120-day study. I know it was 120 days long, but it seemed longer at some point. But we got through it, and it ended in January with our first draft of these challenges and the recommendations. And they were then significantly modified and adjusted by the deans and others and various members of the subcommittee. I want to give a special thanks to Jim Moyer and Paul Whitney for crafting the various subcommittees' writings into a very nice set of 19 final recommendations, which, again, are being implemented by a large group of people, and we will talk about that in future meetings in more detail. So thank you for your effort on the study. So what came out of it? Again, the recommendations, 19 of them, which are in those categories of be strategic, collaborative, and visible. The grand challenges came out. Of course, that's what we're going to talk about today. And then there's the report itself, which is 450 pages. It's mostly archival. It's on the web right now for comment for the university community. The URL is up there. Please log in, read it, and send us comments. The web comments we've received on this for the whole process have been very informative. In fact, they drove the formulation of these challenges themselves. So please comment on the report. It will be a living document. So let's just talk a bit about the challenges. So first of all, what is a grand challenge? Okay, and this is some wording that is a derivative of something on the OSTP website. Okay, but I like it. But basically, they're ambitious and achievable goals that harness our capabilities and to solve important global and national problems that are interdisciplinary in nature. A number of institutions, universities, and others, use these sorts of things to, as I'll show in a minute, define and focus, communicate, and advocate for their research agenda. And I think they're very well suited to the strengths we have here. So, how exactly do these things enhance the university's research agenda? I think about this in sort of three ways: from the perspective of a researcher, i.e. many of our researchers here, from the university's overall perspective, and the perspective of a sponsor. So if I'm a faculty member and I see these 5 challenges on sustaining health and other things, I would say, well, what do they mean to me? And I think the most important thing to understand is that they represent an additional research outlet for you, multidisciplinary thing. It's not your research or this, it's what you do, and this is another opportunity for excellence, if I could use that catchphrase. So it's really another opportunity for you, right? As Dan said, one of the things we're doing now, and the leadership teams are going to be doing, is we're going to be putting together, the prioritized investment needs for major investments for these and going through that. That's what's going to happen on the leadership side. But on the researcher side, though, it's very important to look at this as not either or, but it's an and. It's another opportunity for you to join a larger team. As it says at the bottom there, if I'm a sponsor, I tend to like these things because if I fund someone who's working on a grand challenge, I know I'm getting a lot of other people involved that I'm not paying for, which is free. If I was a sponsor for many years, sponsors like free, right? They like interdisciplinary stuff because they get a lot of extra things for it without paying for it. From the university's perspective, these things facilitate collaboration, which is important to us because in today's world, so many things that our sponsors want to do are multidisciplinary. WSU is really set up very well to do this quite naturally. It may seem hard to believe sometimes, but I come from some organizations that are truly not very functional, right? And we're much better off here than many of the places I've been. Let me just say that. So I think we're actually very well set up to do that. I think in communications world, I want to introduce Ann Gose, who's working on the communications plan for these grand challenges. So raise your hand, Ann. Many of you have heard from her. You'll all hear a lot more from her. And it's pretty easy to hear her, by the way. Okay. So from the university's perspective, these things are a very effective way to communicate what we do. Imagine yourself stuck in an elevator with a congressional staffer, and they say, what do you do for research? Rather than thinking about, what did my friend tell me he did last week, you can talk about these big things that we do. So there's communications advantages too. Okay, so again, what are these challenges? They're, as I said, they're inspirational, multidisciplinary, inclusive. And there is a list of the 5 of them, and I won't go through them in detail because that'll be the next part of our meeting, but sustaining health, food, energy, water, opportunity, equitable society, smart systems, and then national security are the 5 areas. And we'll be talking about each of those in a bit more detail. And as I talked about earlier, these things are going to be an integral part of the university's agenda, right? It's rolled out in September at the 125th anniversary. So one of the main things that we need to do between now and then is we very much, and this is part of that process, is the leadership teams have to craft a little more detail on the research opportunities in each of these 5, and we'd like your input, right? This is the thing you're going to hear today repeatedly. We'd like your input on that. So here are the leadership teams right now for each of the 5, and they each have a representative here today to talk. And so, these charts will be available on the web after this. Feel free to communicate with these people with your input, or you can send it to our 120-day website, or you can contact me or Ann or Derek or anyone else on this if you have thoughts on this. We'd appreciate it. But those are the teams, and they're going to be putting together, the next level of documents on this. It's up to them to figure out the best way to work with the faculty in the most inclusive way. Okay, and so that'll be a challenge over the next few months as we work towards trying to get the next level of detail fleshed out on these by September. So just a little comment on the communications. This is kind of how Ann looks at this. Basically what we'd like to do is develop 3 levels of messaging for either our internal audiences or our outside audiences. And they're very similar, but there could be some differences obviously in the details between the 2. At the most top level, there's a very simple message, like could be one sentence, say, helping keep America secure, or provide, feeding, several billion people. Some very simple message at the top level. The next level is sort of a one-page description or a summary you'd give to a colleague, not in the field or someone who's interested, like a staffer. And then the third level is the more detailed research level. As a physicist, right? I think that essentially once we have that information, we can provide any information or briefing we want to any audience by doing some linear combination of those 3 types of input, okay? And so right now what we like to do is we've worked very hard on sort of the top level messaging for this. We want to share that with you today. We want to get these down into with you, the faculty and the staff that actually really does the work, really get your insights, and you've also contributed a lot already. We want to get this sort of thread into the research fabric of what we do every day, the proposals we turn in, and so on. So that'll be the first step for the leadership teams, and that's what we'll be talking about more. So again, how can you participate? Again, as I said earlier, please look at the report. Talk to the leadership team members that are, again, the representatives here today. This report will be on these charts are on the web. The names are available. Okay. We'll have another town hall on September 2nd where you hear more about the definition of these detailed opportunities, right? Because we'll be doing work on this over the next few months. And I think also it's very important that even if you wind up not being directly involved every day, it's very important that you know about this. You be aware that it's an important part of the university's agenda, and that you communicate it to your folks out there at meetings and scholarly events or wherever else, right? It's part of WSU raising its visibility in the research world, communicating the excitement of what we do. That's so important, right, to improving our brand, to improving our name, to improving our visibility, to taking us to that next level. Is all understanding where the university is going. So, okay, now we're going to get to the next part of the meeting, which is you're going to hear from people that actually really, know what they're doing on this. We're going to you're going to hear from each of the challenge speakers. I'll start in a moment with John Roll. But what you'll hear from them is, first of all, who they are and why this particular problem is a grand challenge. What is the current view of the context of that challenge? What's the content? What's in it? Okay, why we're well positioned to do it, and then their group's thoughts on how to move forward in terms of defining this next level of detail, And then over time, we will be looking at trying to determine the prioritized investments for each challenge, or the candidate list, and we, the leadership, will think about how to prioritize it. That's what we do. But it's hard to prioritize until we have a better sense of exactly what the agenda is. Okay, so that's where we're going with respect to that. So just about ready to turn it over. And I wanted to just say again, thank you for your past involvement, and we appreciate your future involvement. That is the key to success, is getting your thoughts, your input, and then your involvement as an active researcher and scholar and member of the WSU community. So with that, I'll stop. Take any questions for brief ones. We'll have a longer discussion later, and then I'll turn it over to John. So any quick questions right now while I'm up here? Okay, any questions from our AMS colleagues? Could you hear all that? Okay, great, thank you. So, John?
Thanks, Chris. So I need to be clear that our leadership team has not gathered and formally met yet. Dr. Whitney is in the audience here in front of me. He's on the team, as well as the other folks whose names Chris put up a moment ago. So this is really, from my perspective, an initial conversation with you to engage you, give you a bit of the basics about what we're thinking of, and hope that we can really facilitate a dialogue, because this needs to be increasingly faculty-driven, I believe, to really be successful. So I am the Senior Vice Chancellor at Spokane, but that doesn't qualify me to be on this leadership team, I don't think. So I wanted to just say that I'm here as a researcher, really, in this role. One who's been funded and is funded continuously by NIH for 20 years. So I'm not here in an administrator capacity, I'm here in a researcher role. So clear the air on that. The grand challenge is to achieve a sustained state of health for all people in communities. It is important, I think, to note that in this grand challenge we encompass not only the maintenance of health, but also the acquisition of health. So we're not only talking about maintaining healthy behavior, healthy states. We're talking about transitioning from a disease state to a healthy state, or from a state of injury to a healthy state, and then maintaining. So that's important to note. In the documents that I don't know if you've read, it's well defined. I'm just going to read a brief blurb from the Sustaining Health Challenge here. The university's land-grant mission supports a critical mass of highly productive faculty and staff committed to better health through the improved production of safe, healthful foods, the sharing of acquired knowledge. WSU's statewide campuses are home to an impressive contingent of basic scientists and clinicians engaged in both fundamental and applied health research. WSU faculty train and work with healthcare providers in medically underserved communities and other communities. They optimize healthcare delivery and preventative healthcare in at-risk regions of the state. We're well positioned to optimize human health by advancing knowledge of the natural, social, and built environments in many different facets. The result of this will be collaboration and synergy across multiple strengths, including comparative biology, medicine, anthropology, economics, nutrition, healthcare delivery, fundamental cell and molecular biology, basic and applied infectious disease research, surveillance, epidemiology, psychology, sociology, pharmacology, education, and programs like the Paul G. Allen School of Global Animal Health, which will be crucial. It really is envisioned to be a multidisciplinary set of activities. So we have this obvious emphasis on multidisciplinary, interprofessional, however you want to approach that. Something that I think will be absolutely critical is to keep in mind that if we have a psychologist, a genetics researcher, and a nurse, say, collaborating on a project, unless each one of them is outstanding and excellent in their own chosen field, the multidisciplinary collaboration will fall flat. So we need to make sure that everybody is very strong in their own field. This quest for collaboration should not detract from our quest for continued excellence in everybody's own field. And that will need to be built into this as we advance. The specific research themes identified are understanding health of the onset and progression of disease. This includes the fundamental biology of life, the molecular and cellular basis of disease, brain behavior relationships, and advanced materials in health. Changing the course of disease, this includes novel therapeutic strategies, pharmacogenomics, and individualized therapies, and innovative solutions to infectious diseases. Also promoting individual health and wellness, looking at healthful foods, nutrition, health literacy. I see Erica Austin in the audience. Behavioral and social and cultural influences on health. Promoting healthy communities and populations, interventions to improve public health and wellness outcomes, healthcare access in rural and underserved areas, food safety, biosecurity, reproductive health, and of course, global animal health. So I do have to say, after going through that list, that if you can't find yourself in this health one, you might not be breathing. I think this is a pretty broad net, and there's going to be room for everybody to make really meaningful and I hope substantive and novel contributions in this. As we move forward, I want to reiterate that I don't think any of those that I just outlined are orthogonal. They all have obvious connection points, and in fact, I think many of the grand challenges have obvious points of intersection, and we'll look to capitalize on those as we go along as well. Also, I want to emphasize that we have to look at multiple levels of analysis, from genetic, cellular, to individual, to community, to huge data sets that maybe include the entire world. Why not? Or maybe Jupiter, to include Chris. And the final thing I want to say is that my take on science and funding of science is that often nowadays, for better or worse, we need to talk about the applied significance of what we do. That's not in any way to diminish the absolute crucial importance of the basic unapplied work that's done here. But when we really talk about this applied outcome of our work, we'll want to adopt a bidirectional approach, I believe, where we have scientists and clinicians working hand in hand and informing each other as they go along. And I might even propose that for some of the human health outcomes that we include that to a tri-dimensional approach, where we talk to researchers, clinicians, and patients and/or the patient's family, so we can more quickly triangulate on effective solutions that are not only effective, but that are adaptable to the real-world setting quickly. And I think that will help us optimize our ability to get out in the field with new, innovative protocols quickly. Now, Anne is telling me to stop. Thank you.
Thanks, John, very much. Let's go through each challenge, and then we'll do the questions after. So next will be Stephanie Hampton for Food, Energy, Water.
So I'm Stephanie Hampton. I'm the director of the Center for Environmental Research, Education, and Outreach here at WSU. So CEREO is what you'll hear me say. And I've been here for about a year and a half, and I'm very pleased to look out and see that I know about a third of you. So I'm doing pretty good, but I don't know you all. So I'm really looking forward to meeting lots and lots of new people through interacting with you over this grand challenge and others. And as John said, you know, our teams, I think, largely haven't met. I'm not sure if any of them have met yet to move on to this next stage. The Sustainable Resources, Food, Energy, Water Group will meet in about a week. And I'd certainly welcome any of your comments prior to that, and we'll certainly be actively seeking your comments, your input, and your engagement after that as well. So I was one of the leaders of a food, energy, water workshop that we did at WSU in May. So I actually do have some slides from that presentation. It's all pictures, don't worry. But one of the things that motivated this conversation, and I think motivates this grand challenge, is that policy setters and funders are increasingly interested not just in the scarcity of food, energy, water resources, but also the interdependencies. And this means different things in different systems, what these interdependencies might be. And I'm going to show you some examples of some of the things we think about here at WSU and people are thinking about globally that help to sort of fuel that creativity and thinking about these issues. In terms of funders' interest, for example, National Science Foundation in their 2016 budget requested $75 million for food, energy, water as a new initiative. And certainly they're just one of many funders who are looking at this issue. So in thinking about, some of you might look at this pile of discarded food and you see discarded food. Others will also look at this and see not only discarded food, but also discarded energy and water that went into growing this food. Here in the Pacific Northwest, certainly we think a lot about the competing uses of water for hydropower, for fish, aquatic habitat, and other water uses that happen along the Columbia River in particular. There's been a long-standing tension in the energy-water nexus that many of you who are energy researchers are very aware of, that there's a great need for water for cooling plants, for power, and as we have increasing scarcity of water, that's been an increasing tension. And this tension in the energy-water nexus has really been heightened, or at least our awareness of it has been heightened by the conflicts between fracking and water resources. So about half of the fracking sites in the U.S. are located in areas that have very high water stress. And of course, as we think about how we're going to balance the use of renewable resources, how we're going to balance the trade-offs in using our food, energy, and water resources, many of us here at WSU and all over the world are involved in developing the complex algorithms, whether that's in terms of energy allocation or in terms of understanding the genetics of the organisms that are involved in these food, energy, water systems. So development of advanced algorithms and computing power is a big part of addressing the food, energy, water challenges, so that we can think about the trade-offs that we're making when we choose to allocate land, water, or energy towards biofuels or food crops, for example. And that's going to involve highly interdisciplinary teams to help to evaluate those decisions. And many of us who have expertise that allows us to dig deep into systems and understand them at a very deep mechanistic level so that we know what we're trading off when we make those decisions as a society. Now, I think so far everything that I've talked about really has engaged people in very direct ways, but just to make it very explicit, there are certainly, I think we'd be hard-pressed to find a food, energy, water issue that does not involve some issue of ethics or social justice or environmental justice. So, for example, if you make a decision to put in a dam that increases the food security or the water security for one population, you may be radically decreasing the food security of another population. And of course, in a university like WSU, where we have a very strong extension system, I think we're all keenly aware that the innovations that we might be able to suggest as scholars are not going to be effective if people don't have a willingness or an ability to actually work with those innovation suggestions. And that's from the individual level, such as that of the farmer, up to increasingly complex organizations of governance. And we have all of these strengths at WSU, and I've met many of you who are engaged in this sort of research. So I think it's pretty explicit by now that the Sustainable Resources Challenge, it involves food, energy, and water as key themes, as well as society, governance, and sustainability that really draws in a wide variety of disciplines. And as John said, if you don't see yourself in this theme, then come talk to me, because I think I can find a place. It's quite broad, and it truly is a grand challenge that I think is going to be pretty exciting for us, and I think globally. And I think I already mentioned, if you have thoughts to share, you can just email me directly, and I'll keep track of those communications to share with the broader team when we meet. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. Great charts. I'm sure many of us will be stealing them. Okay. Bruce, would you like to talk now?
Hi everyone, I'm Bruce Pinkleton. I'm the Associate Dean of the Memorial College of Communication, and I have no pictures or slides to show you, so you're just going to have to stare at me, and I'll do my best to look presentable and keep you entertained here. I am on the leadership team for the Advancing Opportunity and Equity Grand Challenge. And as everyone knows, a thriving society depends on equal opportunity for all citizens. And we know disparities exist in education, health, access to government, employment, and related areas. And as a result, we need research to help address these areas to contribute to greater equity for all of our citizens. Really, if you think about recent current events, I can think of no greater grand challenge in many respects than this particular grand challenge. If you look at WSU's strategic plan, you'll see an emphasis on a university community that is diverse, inclusive, and equitable. And so this grand challenge really sits at the very foundation of what WSU wants to be about. And if you look at the strategic plan, you'll also find different aspects of this grand challenge throughout the strategic plan as well. So it's really integrated horizontally at WSU as well as vertically, I think. If you think about the different kinds of research we have going here at WSU, you understand that there are a lot of ways you can contribute to this grand challenge. I've identified just a few that are exemplars, really, of the opportunities we have here. These areas of research might include, as an example, developing a clear understanding of the ways in which individuals, media, and government intersect, and this includes access to digitized information, what we call the democratization of information, to help produce social capital and develop a more just, equitable government, producing outcomes for everyone. Understanding ways to more effectively educate everyone throughout their lifespan in a variety of disciplines that allows them to maximize their individual potential. And also, throughout this process, emphasizing the application of rigorous, systematic research methods that allow us to evaluate programs, educational policies, other governmental emphases to determine best practices that contribute to the success of all citizens. One of the things that I really like about this grand challenge is its breadth. I'm a social science, primarily do quantitative research. If you're in the social sciences, if you're in the humanities, you can find yourself here quite easily, frankly. This is not the only grand challenge where you can find yourself, but I think sometimes social scientists feel a little overlooked when we start talking about grant funding and big dollars and those kinds of things, but you can find yourself here. So it's time for us to begin to work together, to collaborate. We do a lot of this research individually in pockets across the university at the various branch campuses as well. And really the purpose of this grand challenge, of this emphasis, is to allow us to bring ourselves together, to begin to collaborate in a smarter way perhaps, creating a more systematic effort that produces outcomes that are going to be beneficial to the state, our country, of course, and the world as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Next will be Dave Field for the Smart Systems.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Dave Field. I'm the Associate Dean for Research and Graduate Education in the Boylan College of Engineering and Architecture, and also a member of the interdisciplinary PhD program in Material Science and Engineering. That is also part of this challenge, of course. So the challenge that we're talking about now is improving quality of life through smart systems. Originally we called this adaptive technology, but nobody seemed to know what adaptive technology meant. So we switched it to smart systems, and hopefully that's more descriptive. Basically what we're talking about here is a interwoven network of devices, sensors, controls, computational algorithms that work off data to help us in our lives, that we can improve the way we work, the way we play, pretty much all aspects of our lives that it could potentially help us with. There is a rapidly developing philosophy around the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything, that falls well within this challenge. A lot of work in data sciences, computational sciences. when some of us in the older generations think of this type of technology, a lot of times we think of movies like Minority Report or a number of films where the hero has to go in and kill the computer that's usurped control and go in and figure out how to kill this computer so humans can regain control of their surroundings and their society. My 3-year-old grandson doesn't seem to have any such trepidation as he goes in and teaches me how to use different apps on a smartphone that I've never seen and control things. And, he does things I don't know about. So the world is changing. These systems are being developed that are going to help us more and more in our lives. And there's a number of issues around these that we have to get a handle on, including not only the technical issues of how to develop these, but also the issues of communication, technical communication, the issues of societal impact and societal reservations about some of these technologies. We also have not yet met as a leadership team for this challenge, but we will be doing so soon, and we will have a series of workshops also that we hope will invite a significant number of input from many of you. As far as what we do at WSU right now that leads into this types of things, we had basically a chart of a foundation. Actually, Aurora Clark, I saw her up here. She came up with this idea for this chart. We basically have materials, emergent foundational materials, upon which components can be developed, upon which systems are designed and built. And so it includes things like material science. We have a number of strengths in this area at WSU, including our long-standing Composite Materials Engineering Center that uses bio-based polymers and composite materials is where their strength is to develop structures and devices. We have our Center for Materials Research. We have some what I would call emerging strengths in areas of electronic or flexible electronic materials, things that can go into your clothing, these types of things, in order to communicate with us, things like your Fitbit and these types of things. So the material science in general, computational materials is another area where we have some real strength at WSU. This goes into devices, components. We have some emerging areas of strength and areas of advanced manufacturing. We have some 3D printing of a number of different types of components and structures and materials that is rapidly gaining strength, rapidly gaining acceptance in the manufacturing world. We have a number of smart systems developers and development that goes on at WSU, including what goes on with our Energy Systems Innovation Center, which includes about a dozen power engineers and goes through all. There's a number of people involved from sociology, from economics, and a number of people that are involved in this center. They basically work with PNNL, who also has strengths in this area, as well as Avista and some of the other industrial companies locally to help develop smart cities and smart grids. I only have 1 minute. I thought I was going quick. The other one that I wanted to bring up was the Smart Homes Project with Diane Cook. I don't see her or Aaron or some of the other people that are involved in that project. Maybe a few people I see that are involved. That's basically projects to be able to help an aging society or those who can't take care of themselves as well as to stay in their homes for longer periods of time through assistance. This requires, like I said, data science and computational sciences, as well as the sensors and of course the societal acceptance of these products and technologies. So hopefully I've given you a feel for what this is, if you knew what adaptive technology was or smart systems or not, and have an idea that these are types of things that are being more and more developed, and we are playing a large role in that at WSU, and we'll invite any type of participation and comments from you in the future.
Okay, Dave, thank you very much. And the last one today will be the national security one. And actually do this a bit of a tag team. I'll do the introduction and several of the elements, and then Tim Basler and Jim Harlick here will do the other two. So this challenge basically is pretty straightforward. Obviously, you know, WSU's mission is not to ensure the national security of the U.S., but if you look at the U.S. national security strategy, it is filled with a lot of discussion about the need for advanced research in very fundamental areas to, you know, support our nation's security. This document came out in February of 2015, and if you read it, again, you'll see a lot of things in there that are very, very much in WSU's areas of research excellence and competence. And we've picked 4 major ones as sort of the thrust of this challenge, and they're shown on the screen there. And they are the study of matter in extreme conditions, which involves the Institute of Shock Physics. RADChem, which I'll talk about more in a minute. I'll cover that one myself. Nuclear chemistry. Quality of life in our developed countries, our activities in international development and things of that sort. And finally, disease surveillance and things like that through the Allen School, which Tim will talk about. So let me talk a bit about these. I'm going to cover the nuclear chemistry one. As I said, Jim will then do shock physics, and Tim will finish up with the last two. On our nuclear chemistry, radiochemistry activity, I think many of you know this, but WSU is one of the leading institutions in the country. We have our 1 megawatt research reactor here, which when I got here, I was actually really amazed at how little publicity it really got. But it is a gem. It's been called a national treasure by some of our colleagues at the National Laboratory and the Department of Energy. It's very heavily used. Recently, they've started getting a lot more independently funded research. So that's very good news. In addition to that reactor, we actually have a 7 or 8 member faculty group in RADChem. Sue Clark, Aurora, others are involved in that. It's a very strong group. Some of you may know they're hosting right now a major U.S. summer school in radiochemistry. It's at WSU right now. So this is an area where we really have strong reputation. And I'll stop there, and I'm now going to turn it over to Jim for a moment to talk about the matter in extreme conditions, and then Tim after that.
Matter extreme conditions is sort of characterized by the complexity and excitement that it brings. It's complex because it's inherently multidisciplinary. So if you ask, what is the interior of Jupiter, what is the interior of the Earth, you have to address the chemistry, the atomic physics, the condensed matter, the whole sort of gamut of physical sciences to be able to understand what the material is of these extreme conditions. But it's also that excitement that it brings, because it's actually pushing our understanding into regions where we have no experimental data. What happens when you push atoms so close together that the inner core electron shells overlap? And so really, it's sort of the frontier of physical science. It's pushing these boundaries. And then approaching the very short time scales. When we push something at the fastest that we can push these atoms together, how do the atoms respond? And as Chris mentioned, the Institute for Shock Physics is pushing this frontier. And WSU has a 55-plus year history of being internationally recognized as the academic leader in shock physics. And we believe that we can build on this, exploring new and more interesting fields, interesting materials being developed. What are the responses? And so this will play. This is actually the fundamental research which leads into the national security missions in military and energy research. Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for sitting me between the engineers and health science guy. I've learned something already. Okay. Just quickly, you might think health sciences and disease surveillance might be a bit of a stretch thinking about national security, but I told my son once when he was in high school that he asked me why I come to work every day, and I told him that it was about food security, that I felt I was helping to feed the world in one way or another by doing disease surveillance on animals for animal health. So I just wanted to share a couple of experiences we've had, and I'm here, I'm a professor in the College of Veterinary Medicine, and I'm also a faculty member in the School for Global Animal Health. And one of the things one of the trifecta of the mission of the school is disease surveillance, both at the domestic level and at the global level. So some of you might be aware of the Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab that involved in a number of networks domestically to look for disease surveillance. In fact, Our lab was the one that found avian influenza here. The high path AI that occurred here last December was the first lab to find it. So there's networks in place, there's expertise in place here and across our country to transition into global surveillance. I just got back yesterday from Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and I was over there doing laboratory assessments so that they can do a better job with disease surveillance. Because if they do surveillance and we believe their lab results, we get a head start on finding out what's coming our way. We're increasingly connected across the globe. We can't just think about what we do in our own country as far as disease surveillance goes. So last year I was in Tanzania doing laboratory assessments, trying to build laboratory capacity. One unique part of doing these international work is trainings that must go on. The funding that's supporting this is agencies like USAID or Defense Threat Reduction Agency. There's interest in food security, but there's also interest in knowing where bioterrorism agents might be and where they might be stored. So Department of Defense has a vested interest in building these capacities for disease surveillance. In my recent trip to Phnom Penh, we're trying to build their quality management systems in their lab. So what that is do they train their people? Do they have standard operating procedures? How do they handle their equipment? How do they deal with their reference reagents and those kinds of things? So we have to do training there. We have to do education. So there's a component there for teaching. We are a university and we teach. And we need, it's not just about fundamental research, but when you go out and train and try to apply these things, we find teaching is a big component of that. So just a couple of, yeah, that's all I've got to say about that. I'm still half jet lagged here. So.
Well, the AC's on now, so at least that's better. Okay, thank you. So let's see. I'll just go back to the agenda. So let's see, John, are you here yet? John Gardner? Okay.
Yes, Chris, I am.
All right, John, welcome. Are you sufficiently? You just sat down. Did you just walk in?
No. I've been here for all of 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, would you like to say a few words from the foundation perspective?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you. And for those of you I have not had a chance to meet yet, my name is John Gardner. I'm the CEO of the foundation and Vice President for Advancement. So I work closely with Tim Pavish and our Alumni Association and the Cougs who are alums and adopted alums, and as well as Kathy Barnard and her whole team in University Communications. And so I would describe myself as kind of rallying the private support for WSU and all the tools that we use to rally such support. And that's what Chris was going to give me just a few minutes to talk about and how it fits in with the grand challenges. Yesterday at 5 p.m. we closed the campaign for Washington State University and made history. We closed it. I don't have the final numbers yet, but probably $1.06 billion and change we probably raised in the last 8 years in terms of private support for WSU. And if you'll recall, the people that have been here, it was the campaign for big ideas. But those ideas weren't necessarily framed very well. They were, I would describe them as more exploratory. And I would suggest that in the past 8 years, we got exactly what we asked for. I mean, we would have never guessed we would have created the Paul Allen School for Global Animal Health when we started that campaign. We would have never guessed we would have had the Boylan College and the emphasis and the resources through about a $17 million gift on catalysis and chemical engineering. We probably would have never guessed the Carson College would have happened. We probably never would have guessed we'd be starting a med school, being audacious enough to start a med school. So those were some of the large things that came out of that private support, but there was lots of small things too. We had over 200,000 donors. We haven't finished counting them all yet. And I would just say, That is almost twice as much as any of our peer institutions. Oregon State just finished their first $1 billion campaign. They had about 100,000 donors. Oklahoma State just finished their first $1 billion campaign. They didn't meet 100,000 donors. So we had almost twice the amount of participation, which I think is very much in part and parcel kind of what WSU is all about, being widely held. And we're very proud of that. And thank you for helping with that. But Today marks looking forward and planning for the next campaign, and that's what I wanted to mention in terms of how it relates to the grand challenges. I would suggest that last time, the needs assessment that you all filled out, we gave you a blank piece of paper and blue sky, and you filled that out back in 2006 and 2007. This fall, we're going to give you another piece of paper for a needs assessment that the faculty and staff will be working on this coming academic year. And yet, it's going to have room for kind of grassroots creativity, but it's going to also be met with institutional priorities. Institutional priorities that came from our strategic plan and come from our capital plan that we now have, and that come from the grand challenges, among other things. And so I would suggest that this time, actually this next campaign that we're going to go after, if we did well this past time, I think we're going to do extremely well, because we're going to have in place really kind of institutional priorities. So there's going to be things that happen in the next campaign that we would never guess. But because of the institutional priorities, some of which are contained in the grand challenges, for example, I think we're going to get kind of cross-college, cross-discipline, cross-campus, cross-state, across the world kind of collaborations that we might never have guessed to build kind of public-private partnerships. Because one of the things that the grand challenges represent to me as a cheerleader and a rallier of private support for WSU, it allows us to aim together with Colleen Kerr and the whole public side, the people who work in government relations both in Olympia as well as at Washington, D.C., in terms of really public-private partnerships that we really have never worked on in the kind of fashion that Chris is working on it now, that Colleen is working on it now, and I can say that all of the folks in advancement are working for it now. So look for that this coming fall. This fall also, and Chris might have already mentioned, on September 17th and 18th, we're going to have a lot of our private support donors in on campus. We're going to be celebrating this past campaign, but we're also going to use a small portion of that as well to roll out the kinds of ideas for the next campaign. And Chris will be speaking, I believe, during parts of that time on the 17th and 18th, and we're going to be exposing our donors, not only in celebration of the past, but a peek at the future of what WSU has in store. So those are the plans. Stay tuned. We'll be in touch. And I appreciate all the hard work of Chris and all the colleagues on tying together these kind of institutional priorities. As a fundraiser and someone who speaks to external audiences on behalf of us all, it's wonderful to have a kind of framework that the grand challenges have given. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, John, thank you very much. Appreciate those comments. So that concludes the presentation part of our agenda. Thank you all speakers for being prompt, and now we have some time for discussion. So really, this is open. Let's see. I think actually maybe I'll just kick off with. Oh, I'm sorry. One question in the back. Go ahead.
It's part of the discussion.
Okay, sure. So why don't you go ahead, actually? Okay. That's fine.
So I'm Christopher Lupke, I'm Foreign Languages.
Yes, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Dr. King. And I find this really impressive. I like the detail, I like the organization, and I like the grand vision and this focusing on the challenges that you have laid out here. What I think is more or less missing, respectfully, from my perspective, is the element from the humanities. So I went through the document, and the word humanities doesn't appear in the document at all. And some people mentioned it today, and I'm grateful for that. So what I would suggest in terms of moving forward with these leadership committees is to bring some people from the humanities into the project, because I think from my perspective, and I don't really speak for all my colleagues, but I'll try to speak for them, that there is a general feeling of being left out, particularly with respect to research, certainly not with teaching at our university. Just as sort of a nuts and bolts suggestion would be to do a better job of getting humanities faculties on some of these committees. I think in the big core committees you had, there are only 2 people from the humanities in it, which is it's not enough in my opinion. But also, and this is more of a conceptual suggestion, of not thinking of the humanities as something that's off on one side. Like, let's say, you have climate change, you have technology, health issues, etc. And then on this side you have poetry, or you have ethnic studies or foreign languages, whatever. Rather, to think of ways in which the humanities are infused across all of these challenges and with all of these issues, and then each and every one of them, and I won't belabor it now because we don't have time, but each of them has a human element without which we will never be able to solve these as a nation.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's a great comment. So let me just make carry a few more thoughts on that one. So this is something that the 120-day study leadership team and all of the subgroups in there really thought about this problem very hard in terms of being inclusive in social sciences and humanities. Obviously, we can do more. We've only had a finite number of people involved in this so far, putting these things together. So that sort of gets to my next comment, which is sort of, the generic path forward for all these things is that we have these, 4 or 5 person leadership teams identified. In addition to, sort of fleshing out the first cut of this next level of detail, a very important thing that those teams need to do is start to do, a proper workshop on each of these 5, right? And again, many of you are familiar with the workshop sort of models, of course. This is how we make progress in research and defining the opportunities, defining the next steps. Instead, is to get people in a room, more than 4 or 5, a larger group, which would include many of your colleagues, right, to talk about these issues. We haven't done those large-scale workshops at any of these 5 yet. Okay, these have been done via the subgroups in the 120-day, and now transitioning to the actual faculty leadership teams. The next step is the broader workshop definition, right? And so I think as these leadership teams sort of flesh out at the top level, the next level of detail, right? That will drive the workshop agenda. And what you raised, well, I'm certain will be front and center for all of them, because it has been actually a topic, and we probably could have done better, but it's certainly been something we've been trying to keep in mind throughout the entire course of the study. It's very important to be inclusive.
The emphasis should be on how we move from here, not. I mean, I think you've done a great job, by the way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks to the team. It's been, as I said, 200 people who worked on it. But yeah, so I mean, I think the big workshops will really help on that, because we need to get some number of 10s or more in a room of people on each of these problems. We have not done that yet. Okay, other comments? Yeah.
Chris, can you tell us when those workshops might take place? If they'll be during the academic year or over the summer? Some of my faculty are 9-month and would like to participate.
Right. Oh, it's my great pleasure to turn to my colleagues here for that, but I can tell you that they can't answer you yet.
Okay.
Because, let me just say in terms of the overall schedule, this is a very sort of early on meeting we did today. We wanted to try and catch some of you while you were still here. Thank you again for coming. We're going to have another one of these in September. And I expect by then the teams will probably have a better idea of when they want to have these bigger workshops. But first they have to sit down and flesh out a little bit more of the research opportunities in each one, because it's hard to have a workshop until you know who you want to invite, right? And to know who you want to invite, you have to decide a little bit more detailed specific research areas you're going to go after, which is the next step. So stand by.
Thank you.
And September 2nd is the next town hall meeting.
Right.
And so we'll be sending out a follow-up from this meeting. They can also watch this online. We'll have that posted on the website.
Okay.
So knowing they've got 9-month appointments, they might not be checking, but we will definitely be building in more opportunities for more engagement.
Thank you.
Let me just quickly ask our AMS colleagues, we'll keep going, but we have plenty of time, but just any questions out there? Have you been able to follow all this? Okay, so we'll just keep going. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, please, Tim.
The comment about humanities and teaching, and one thing I've learned in this global work we're doing is we have to do these trainings with residents of that country, of course. We're trying to increase their capacity. And there's a big gap in my knowledge about cultures and language and how do you actually do an effective training and how do you follow up to make it sustainable. And I really would encourage you to, contact my group at least, because it's kind of odd that we get departments of defense funding, but we're talking about humanities here in order to effectively do training. So there's certainly opportunities for that inclusion, but I think at this level, like Chris said, we haven't got to the details of it yet. So.
Thanks, Tim. Other comments? Yeah, Beirut.
So this is more of a comment rather than a question. It seems that in the elevator speech, there needs to be examples that we are doing at WSU of the type of work in each of these categories that will really highlight and be more specific about what we are achieving in each of those areas. So I understand the thing about being inclusive and everything, but I think that we're losing something by being so broad in every area. Then everything and all things are included in all of these areas, and we're missing something there.
Yeah, so it's a couple of comments. So they are sort of by construction broad right now, but the next step is to narrow them. And if you look at the sub bullets under them, they are actually, there's more focus there. But also what you just talked about, the examples. Actually, maybe Ann, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, one of the things that we're working on in terms of building up material and that elevator speech, and even more than an elevator speech, a little lower level, for people like Chris and Belinda and others, is to be sure that we're highlighting great examples of what WSU is doing in these areas. And just listening to our speakers today, they all offered great examples of the prowess of WSU in these areas, and we can share those stories. And when we develop the website, you're going to see a lot of the compilation of those stories. And the new Office of Research website is going to have not only great tools for you as researchers, but excitedly, it's also going to have a portal where we can share the research stories, work with our partners like the Science Coalition in Washington, D.C., and really begin to explore how well we can celebrate the great research that's coming out of WSU.
Okay, thanks, Anna. I think Beirut's also, I think it's important to understand, obviously, right, things like sustaining health. I mean, WSU is not going to, alone going to sustain everyone's health. We do certain pieces of that problem we're very good at. Right, which is,
right. Also, I think I like the example that you previously mentioned about UCLA. When you go to their website, they say we are solving the water problem in California.
Right.
Very simple, very understandable.
Yeah.
Huge problem.
They're going to do it all by themselves. Okay, that's great. It's very good discussion of this. This gets to this issue of how we talk about what we do, and we start the big and then work down the. But this is what we bring to the table in this area. It's a great strength for us. Okay, other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah. My name is Steve Katz. I'm a new faculty at School of Environment. And in quickly reading through the Grand Challenges document, the thing that struck me and the thing that I was sort of waiting to hear and heard a little bit is more about sort of maybe ethics. I don't think any faculty can escape the pressure of seeking resources, and we all recognize that pressure. But as we initiate new things to try and do that more effectively, it's easy to imagine getting into situations where we have to contemplate the ethical implications of some of the applied aspects of defense technology or information technology and whatnot. And it would have been nice to see more upfront, some transparency with respect to sort of core values in the challenges, and that it would reflect community values in terms of what kinds of things we're going to seek resources for.
Thank you. That is a great comment. And I think actually it would be pretty easy to draw a line from these things to the university's value statement, which we have. So that's a great comment. I think we just do that. We should be very clear about that. But I mean, mean, I think from my perspective, I should have said at the beginning, it's a very important piece of the message for us. These challenges are, they are right in the heart of the land grant mission. That's what these things are about. They're about improving the quality of life for people here in the state and the nation, and they are absolutely consistent with the university's values of how we treasure education, research, service, et cetera. So that's a great comment. I think we need to make sure we read the value statement.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, you had a question, sir.
It's Alex Hammond. I'm retired English department since 2009. Still a little active in emeritus stuff, still do some consulting with academic journals in the English department. At a couple points, some of them are partially sort of narrow hobby horses, but the broad one has to do beginning with foundation. Just a suggestion, the challenges strike me as in fact having different dimensions. Obviously you have to have the money to support them, but there's something else. $1 billion involves a whole lot of things which are invested, and at least part of my sense of that is it would make sense, it seems to me, to ask, as disconnected as the foundation is strictly from university governance, are the investments of the foundation's money reinforcing both the values and particularly the challenges that are here? That narrows down to each of, to where I'm going, but each of the challenges often will reference communities and how the particular challenges are embedded in particular communities. Clearly WSU, its multiple campuses, is literally embedded from Spokane to Pullman to the Tri-Cities and so forth in a range of communities, at least in part when I think of challenges in reference to the equity, opportunity, sustainable health. Clearly, I imagine those communities are a kind of model, a kind of a place to, in fact, illustrate what the university is doing, at least in terms of the communities they're embedded in, the students they work with, all of which brings me down partially to, is that something which the leadership and the challenges can, in fact, ask about? Are the particular workings of the university in its particular embedded communities, in fact, illustrating both the values and particularly some of the challenges that are at work here? More narrowly, that strikes me as something which, and this is just an issue in reference to design. When I think of sustainability, when I think of the university, and I live on College Hill, when I think of what it has changed over the past 20 or so years I've lived there, but more generally, the way in which the university has both grown physically and the way in which it's embedded in its physical environment as well as its cultural environment. One of the things I think about is how, a narrow sense, the foundation has got environments around each of its universities. Does it ever consider its resources in reference to sustaining both the physical, architectural, and health and qualities of those particular environments? And my particular thing here is there is at WSU, there's a National Historic District right up against it, and the university seems to be in the process of thinking about simply selling off historic houses that are connected to communities of color. It's a decision that hasn't been announced generally. Apparently it came in during a period when they were planning for a new multicultural center that were moving those communities apparently off of College Hill. The particular reason for bringing that up is, one more time, does the university, when it thinks about its various environments, does it consider how to make those decisions, and does it consider how they involve these kinds of challenges in terms of what one is doing to, in effect, to illustrate what the university is? Thank you, and thank you.
Okay, so very interesting comments. Let me just try and split that into two pieces. So I heard, first of all, a comment in there about the role of community in the grand challenges and the degree to which these challenges impact those communities, interweave new communities, et cetera. And then I heard a second issue you raised on the foundation and sort of its role in the same. And so let me address the challenge one a bit. And then, if John, are you still on?
Yep, I'm happy to.
Yeah. So and I'll come back to you in a second on the foundation. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So from the challenges side, I think, and let me just speak to see if I get an answer. We've worked very hard to certainly incorporate all the various branch campus elements of the community within the challenges. We envision that we're actually going to put together some new communities as a result of this that are going to be interdisciplinary in nature, right? Some new groups of people will be talking. We'll get some new communities that we hadn't thought about. I also, when I think about the challenges of communities, it actually comes to a point which I wanted to talk about earlier, which I think is worth maybe just John discussing for a moment, is how the sustaining health challenge is going to be ultimately integrated into the community-based. We have an education agenda for the med school. It's community-based education plan for that. Some form of matching research agenda. So let me ask John to comment on that particular challenge for a minute.
Thanks, Chris. So, of course, we're thrilled in Spokane, and I hope most of the university about the medical school. It's a bittersweet tribute to President Floyd, and Chancellor Brown and Dean Roberts worked tirelessly with many people to achieve that goal. And I'd be remiss not to say that Deans Pollock of Pharmacy and Corbett of Nursing really kind of set the stage in Spokane for us to be able to actualize this goal. Part of this is distributed medical education throughout the region in communities where people are really living, with the goal of retaining physicians and other healthcare professionals in those communities. And it's absolutely integral to the success of that, that model, that the communities are part and parcel of what we do. Beyond that, I can say that in Spokane, certainly at the Health Sciences campus, the Chancellor in particular has been very eager to have us look at neighborhoods as a unit of analysis. And there are a number of activities ongoing now in terms of NIH and foundation activities and other sources of research funding and educational offerings to really optimize the health of neighborhoods, really with a focus on the social determinants of health, which I think really kind of gets at what you're saying. So I appreciate your comments as well, and I think that the medical school would be a great way to actualize some of these activities as we move it forward. And when I say the medical school, I think all of the health science professions are in line with that as it develops. Thank you.
Okay, John. Thanks very much. So, John Gardner, do you want to make a few comments from the foundation side?
Yeah, I'm happy to, and I really appreciated the comment. Let me maybe follow on my previous comments that might address some of the questions that were asked. First, our private fundraising at WSU follows a philosophy, and the philosophy is to be donor-centered. That means that when a donor comes to demonstrate private support to WSU, we follow their wishes. I mean, we may try to guide them or suggest if they ask, but we follow the donor's wishes. This is, not all universities follow that approach, but we do. And let me tell you what that result has resulted in. I've already mentioned the high degree of participation in WSU, over 200,000 donors. But I'd also mention that WSU, is apart from most of our peers, in fact all of our peers, has a way higher proportion of individuals that contribute than corporations, both for-profit and nonprofit. Very unusual. Our for-profit, nonprofit slice is relatively small compared to any of our peers, and that's because of this donor-centered nature, that kind of the centricity of WSU's fundraising. Secondly, the diversity, both in students and scholarship, that has been supported by the campaign that just ended. is evident throughout it. I don't have the final numbers yet. We're tallying these to get out to you all. But we created certainly over 600 individual endowments by individuals towards either student or scholarship support. Many of them donor designated, many of them designated towards first-generation higher education, ethnic diversity, specific geographic diversity, specific scholarship targets. The donors have defined a lot of the broad nature of support that the foundation and the campaign has brought to WSU. And so I am a firm believer in donor-centered. One other characteristic about WSU's fundraising, and in this, maybe it's more of a state of Washington, as compared to most of our other peer institutions, very little is put into bricks and mortar. And I mentioned this for the comment of the neighborhood in Pullman there. Actually, the state of Washington on the public side is extremely generous, even in proven in very difficult times to like bricks and mortar, and in walking in their shoes, it's because it's like one-time investments as opposed to putting it in operating for WSU or UW or other parts of public higher ed that live on forever. They like bricks and mortar investments, and because of that, and probably affected by that, has been a lack of support for real bricks and mortar from a lot of our donors. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And I'll just finish, Chris, with the comment that and just reiterate my earlier comments, I think the biggest value of the Grand Challenges to the next campaign it will not change our donor-centered nature, but it will give donors a sense of where we're going. It will give donors a sense of what could be done, and it will be a real scaffold for us to look at public-private partnerships. And I think that's where the real value is, when we can align, federal, state, local support with private support around overall institutional themes. I think that's where it's going to be most valuable. It won't be all of the campaign, and we won't change from the nature of being donor-centered. So I hope that's clear, and it addresses some of the comments that were made, because I appreciate them, and I wanted to make sure that was clear in terms of how we raise private funds.
Okay, thank you, John.
Comment in Everett?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Brad Gerlach with Extension, and I just wanted to comment a bit on some of the conversation initially and conversation around this applied research and working in community, in hope that each of the units recognize, and Stephanie had mentioned the asset the university has in Extension, and we're embedded in every county in this state through our cooperative extension offices, and to hope that as we build out these grand challenges, to recognize the opportunities of applied research with our extension faculty that are embedded in these communities, and obviously would work across all of these grand challenges.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, and I think it's akin to what we heard earlier on the humanities, and I think that the larger workshops that we need to plan for these are where we really need to get more people. Again, right now the planning groups have been, the 120-day study groups have ordered 20 people, so we just have to get more. And that's the main reason we're doing these town halls, is to get the word out, get the thinking about who should go. That's very helpful. It's another community we need to make sure to get involved. Other questions? This has been great feedback, by the way. Thank you. Surely there must be another one. We have 5 minutes left. Okay, well, if not, let me just make a few final comments then, and we'll end on time, which is nice. So as Ann said, we're going to have another town hall September 2nd. By then I think our subgroups will have fleshed out a little bit more detail on the more specific research agendas, plans for, some of these broader workshops. And so a little more meat on the bone. So, watch the website. Ann's group and the communications group are completely redoing. I'm so happy with this. All the Office of Research websites are going to be completely redone. The content that now, the core labs and all that descriptive work will be there, but also there'll be a place you can see what's going on with the Grand Challenge problems and the 120-day study implementation recommendations and all that sort of stuff. So, please give input to me, to Ann, to the Challenge leadership team here. Let me just, for the last few minutes, put those names up again. Okay, and so, there they are, and we'll have this talk up available on the Office of Research website, so you can look up these names again, and Ann has got attendance, and we'll send the stuff around.
And be sure that you are giving us comments, because that's the next round on September 2nd. We hope to have a different version of the 120-day study that reflects the input that we're receiving. So be sure to do that. And I also want to just point out the web team is here. And this is such good input for us, as you are our ultimate customers. And we want to make you just feel like this Office of Research website rocks. And it's the best thing that you have for helping to sell the great research you're doing.
Okay, Ann, thank you. Let me also mention that, the comment Beirut made about having vignettes and stories and specific accomplishments for all these, Ann and her team have put that together, Eric and others on the team, and so that'll also be coming out on the web fairly soon, right? So there'll be more meat on the bones for all these things to be able to see. And of course, the report has, write-ups on these things in it right now, which we can go through. So, any last questions? Any comments from our AMS, any further comments from our AMS colleagues? Okay, well, listen, I want to thank you all again for your participation so far, today and in the future, because it's absolutely essential to our success in moving the university's agenda forward. So thank you again. Have a great day. Scott Cooler.